The moment Mrs. Patricia Hargrove called 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez a leer in front of the entire third-grade class, she had no idea she'd just made the biggest mistake of her career. Emma's cheeks burned with humiliation as 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her, some filled with pity, others with cruel amusement. All because she dared to speak proudly about her father during show and tell. "My daddy works very hard," Emma had said softly, clutching a faded photograph of a smiling man in a janitor's uniform. "He cleans this school every night so we can learn in a beautiful place. And on weekends, he helps people who don't have homes. He says everyone deserves kindness." Mrs. Hargrove had smiled, that thin, condescending smile Emma had seen before. "That's very sweet. Emma, but didn't you tell us last week that your father knows important people? That he's friends with business leaders and helps run programs for the poor?" She paused, her voice dripping with skepticism. "A night janitor doesn't exactly move in those circles, does he? It's okay to be proud of your father's real job without making up stories." The classroom erupted in giggles. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she stood her ground. "I'm not lying. My daddy does know important people. He does help people. Just because he cleans doesn't mean—" "Enough, Emma," Mrs. Hargrove cut her off. "Honesty is important. Your father has an honorable job, but let's stick to the truth, shall we?" Emma sat down, tears streaming down her face, while her classmates whispered and pointed. She didn't eat lunch that day, sitting alone under the oak tree in the playground, wondering why grown-ups never believed kids, especially kids whose parents didn't wear fancy suits or drive expensive cars. What Mrs. Hargrove didn't know, what nobody at Riverside Elementary knew, was that Miguel Rodriguez had a story that defied every assumption she'd just made. 25 years earlier, Miguel had arrived in America with nothing but a fifth-grade education, $10 in his pocket, and a heart full of dreams. He'd worked construction, washed dishes, cleaned offices, anything to survive. But Miguel had something special. An unshakable belief that education could change everything, and a genius for understanding people and systems that no classroom had taught him. Late one night, while cleaning the executive offices of a struggling tech startup, Miguel had noticed something. The CEO, a young man named David Chen, sat at his desk at 2 a.m, head in his hands, surrounded by financial documents. Miguel, who'd taught himself to read English by studying discarded newspapers and business magazines, had seen that look before, the look of someone about to give up. "Excuse me, sir," Miguel had said quietly. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I notice you here very late many nights." "Are you okay?" David had looked up, surprised that the janitor spoke to him, more surprised that he seemed to care. In a moment of exhaustion and desperation, he'd opened up. The company was dying. They couldn't get investors to take them seriously. They were weeks from bankruptcy. Miguel had listened, then asked a question that changed everything. "Why do you clean your lobby during the day when clients visit? Making noise and smelling like chemicals, instead of at night when it's free advertising for your cleaning standards?" It was such a simple observation, but it led to a conversation about perception, presentation, and missed opportunities. Miguel, who'd worked a dozen different jobs and observed 100 different businesses, had insights that David's expensive consultants had missed. They talked for hours, then days, then weeks. When David's company finally succeeded, growing into a tech giant worth billions, he never forgot the janitor who'd helped him see clearly when everything seemed dark. Miguel had refused any payment, any title, any recognition. "I have enough," he'd said. "Use the money to help others who are struggling like we both struggled." So David had honored Miguel's wish in a different way. He'd made Miguel a silent partner in his charitable foundation, the Rodriguez-Chen Initiative, which provided education, housing, and job training to immigrants and struggling families across the country. Miguel still worked as a janitor. It kept him humble, he said, kept him connected to real people with real problems. But he spent his weekends running programs, mentoring families, and changing lives. He'd never told Emma the full story. She just knew her daddy helped people and had friends who valued his wisdom. She knew he was important, even if he mopped floors. And she knew he'd taught her that a person's worth wasn't measured by their job title, but by the size of their heart. The day after Mrs. Hargrove's humiliation, Emma came home quiet and sad. Miguel noticed immediately. It took gentle prodding, but eventually the story spilled out between sobs. Miguel held his daughter close, his heart breaking for her pain, but also burning with quiet determination. "Mija," he said softly, "some people judge a book by its cover. They see a janitor and think they know the whole story. But you know the truth. You know that everyone, no matter their job, has dignity and worth. Tomorrow you hold your head high. The truth always comes out." Emma wanted to believe him, but going back to school felt impossible. The next morning, Mrs. Hargrove was in rare form, preparing for the quarterly parent-teacher conferences. She'd been teaching at Riverside Elementary for 15 years and prided herself on keeping students grounded in reality when she saw Emma slip quietly into her seat, eyes downcast. She felt a twinge of something, not quite guilt, but close. Perhaps she'd been too harsh, but really children needed to learn not to exaggerate. At precisely 10 o'clock, there was a knock on the classroom door. Mrs. Hargrove opened it to find Principal Matthews looking unusually flustered, accompanied by a distinguished man in an impeccably tailored suit. "Mrs. Hargrove," Principal Matthews said, his voice tight, "this is David Chen, CEO of Chen Technologies. He's requested a moment of your time." Mrs. Hargrove's face went pale. David Chen was a legend, a billionaire, philanthropist whose company had donated millions to schools across the state. What was he doing here? "I understand you had some doubts about Emma Rodriguez's truthfulness," David said quietly, stepping into the classroom. His tone was polite, but carried an unmistakable edge. Mrs. Hargrove's mouth went dry. Behind David, another figure appeared in the doorway. Miguel Rodriguez, wearing his janitor's uniform, stood beside one of the most powerful men in the country. "This is Miguel Rodriguez," David continued. "My friend, my mentor, and the co-founder of the Rodriguez-Chen Initiative, which has helped over 50,000 families in the past 2 decades. Miguel chose to work as a janitor because he believes in the dignity of all work and staying connected to the community he serves." His daughter wasn't lying. She was telling the absolute truth. The classroom was silent. Emma's classmates stared, mouths open. Mrs. Hargrove felt the world tilt beneath her feet. I didn't know," she stammered. You thought a janitor couldn't possibly be important," Miguel said gently, stepping forward. "I understand. Many people think this way. But Mrs. Hargrove, you teach children. You shape how they see the world. When you tell them that someone's job determines their worth, you teach them to judge, not to understand." David pulled out his phone, showing photographs. Miguel at charity events. Miguel meeting with city officials. Miguel receiving a humanitarian award from the governor. Miguel has been featured in Forbes, Time magazine, and the Wall Street Journal. Not because of what he owns, but because of what he gives. Mrs. Hargrove sank into her chair, tears forming in her eyes. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. So completely wrong." Emma looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. "It's okay, Mrs. Hargrove," Emma said quietly, with a maturity beyond her 8 years. "My daddy says everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what we do after." The next week, Mrs. Hargrove asked if Miguel would speak to the entire school. Standing in the gymnasium before hundreds of students, Miguel shared his story, not to shame anyone, but to inspire. He talked about dignity, kindness, and the danger of judging people by appearances. "I clean your school because someone has to, and it's honest work," he said. "But I also know that every person you meet has a story you can't see. The cafeteria worker might be putting 3 kids through college. The crossing guard might be a war hero." 3 months later, Mrs. Hargrove had transformed her classroom. She started a program called Unseen Heroes, where students interviewed people in jobs others overlooked: janitors, bus drivers, lunch workers, and shared their remarkable stories. Emma became her teacher's assistant for the project, and their relationship healed into something beautiful. Miguel continued cleaning floors at night, but now students left him thank you notes and drawings. Teachers greeted him by name. The school renamed their community service award after him. And Emma? She learned that standing up for truth, even when it's hard, always matters. That kindness is stronger than pride, and that her father, whether the world recognized it or not,